I have presided over more than 40,000 cases in my 43 years on this bench. 40,000. I have watched murderers cry. I have watched con artists smile. I have watched powerful men in expensive suits sit across from me and lie through every single tooth in their heads without flinching. I have seen things in this courtroom that would make most people lose sleep for a month. But on the morning of September 9th, 2024, at exactly 10:22 a.m., my clerk walked into my chambers, placed a USB drive on my desk, looked me dead in the eyes, and said 4 words I will never forget. She said, "Judge, watch this first." She never says that. In 26 years of working together, Christina has never once told me to watch something before I walked into that courtroom. So I plugged that drive into my laptop. And what played on that screen in the next 47 seconds changed everything about how I ran my court that day. What I saw was so vile, so deliberate, so breathtakingly cruel, not in a back alley, not in some dark corner of the world, but inside one of the most expensive, celebrated restaurants in the entire state of California, captured in full color by a stranger's phone, that by the time those 47 seconds were over, I had to close my laptop, stand up, walk to my window, and just breathe, just breathe. Now I'm going to tell you exactly what was on that video. But here's what you need to understand before I do. The person you're about to meet, the woman sitting in that footage, was not a stranger to suffering. She had already been through more in the 3 years before that night than most people face in a lifetime. What happened to her at that restaurant was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not a staff error or a bad night or a moment of poor judgment. What happened to that woman was a choice, a calculated, deliberate, cold-blooded choice made by a man who looked at her and decided, in front of a full dining room, in front of her husband, in front of God and everybody, that she did not deserve to be treated like a human being. And the reason he made that choice will make your stomach turn, because it has nothing to do with what she said or what she did or how she behaved. It has everything to do with the wheelchair she was sitting in. Before I go any further, if you have never subscribed to this channel, I need you to do it right now, not later, right now. Because what I am about to walk you through, the testimony, the trial, what came out in that courtroom and what I did about it, is something that every single person in this country needs to hear. This is not just one woman's story. This is about a system that looks the other way when the wrong people get hurt. And I absolutely refused to be part of that system on September 9th, 2024. Here's what I will tell you right now, and here is what I am going to make you wait for. I will tell you that the man sitting across from me in my courtroom that morning walked in wearing a $5,000 suit with 3 lawyers at his side and not a single trace of remorse on his face. I will tell you that the video, and the one Christina made me watch before I put on my robe, ended up being played in open court in front of every person in that room, including him. And when it ended, the courtroom went so quiet that I could hear the clock on the wall. What I will make you wait for is this: what he said when I looked him in the eye and asked him to explain himself. Because what came out of his mouth next, I could not have imagined it if I tried. It told me everything I needed to know, everything. Stay with me, because this story is far from over. And the ending, I promise you, is one you will be sharing with every person you know before this day is done. Her name was Eleanor Vasquez, 58 years old, born and raised in San Diego, California, the youngest of 4 children in a family that didn't have much money, but had more love than most people experience in 2 lifetimes. Her mother was a seamstress. Her father laid concrete for 31 years. They were the kind of people who taught their children that dignity wasn't something you were handed. It was something you carried, no matter what life threw at you, and Eleanor Vasquez had carried it. Lord, had she carried it. For 27 years, Eleanor taught 3rd grade at Roosevelt Elementary School in Pasadena. 27 years of teaching 8-year-olds how to read, how to add, how to treat each other with kindness. Her former students, and there were hundreds of them, used to send her cards every Christmas. Some of them were grown adults with children of their own, and they still remembered Mrs. Vasquez. They still remembered the way she stayed after school when a struggling child needed more time. The way she bought school supplies out of her own pocket every single September without telling a soul. The way she made every kid in that classroom feel like they were the most important person in the room. She met her husband Daniel when they were both 17 years old, standing in line at a movie theater in downtown San Diego. He bumped into her, spilled popcorn all over her jacket, turned red as a tomato, and apologized so sincerely that she laughed for the first time in weeks. Her father had just been diagnosed with a heart condition, and she hadn't smiled in days. She told me that story herself right there in my courtroom, and even 34 years later, the way her face changed when she talked about that moment, it was something to see. That is what real love looks like. 34 years later, and the memory of a boy spilling popcorn still made her eyes light up. 3 years before she walked into my courtroom, Eleanor started dropping things. Small things at first, a coffee cup, a pen, her keys. Then came the numbness in her legs. Then the fatigue so heavy she described it as trying to walk through wet concrete every single morning. After 4 months of tests and 3 different specialists, the diagnosis came back: multiple sclerosis. Progressive, the kind that does not plateau, the kind that moves in one direction only. Within 18 months of her diagnosis, Eleanor Vasquez, the woman who had stood on her feet in a classroom for 27 years, who had danced at her daughter's wedding, who had hiked Runyon Canyon every Sunday morning with Daniel, could no longer walk without assistance. At 56 years old, she had to retire. She had to surrender the classroom she had given her life to. She had to learn how to live in a wheelchair, in a body that had become a stranger to her, while still trying to be a wife and a mother and a human being who got up every morning and chose not to be destroyed by it. And Daniel, I want you to understand who Daniel Vasquez is. He is a construction foreman. Big hands, quiet voice, the kind of man who fixes things instead of talking about them. When Eleanor got sick, he took a second job doing weekend contracting work to cover the medical costs. The wheelchair alone cost $14,000. Her medications ran $800 a month after insurance. He never complained, not once. Eleanor told me he never once made her feel like a burden. Every single morning for 18 months, he helped her get dressed, made her coffee exactly the way she liked it. 1 sugar, splash of cream, and told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Every single morning. Their 34th wedding anniversary was coming up, and Daniel had been quietly, carefully saving money for 6 months, skipping lunches, picking up extra weekend shifts to take Eleanor somewhere extraordinary, somewhere that matched what she meant to him, somewhere worthy of her. He chose Maison Laurent, the finest French restaurant in Los Angeles. 3 Michelin stars, a 4-month waiting list, a place where for one night, Eleanor Vasquez would not be a patient or a diagnosis or a woman in a wheelchair. She would just be a woman, dressed up, celebrated, and loved. He had no idea what was waiting for them when they got there. Maison Laurent sits on the corner of Wilshire Boulevard and Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. Floor-to-ceiling windows, an entrance with a black awning and a doorman in a pressed suit, the kind of place where the menu has no prices on it because if you have to ask, you cannot afford it. Daniel had made the reservation 4 months in advance. He had confirmed it twice. He had even called ahead the week before to mention politely, specifically, that his wife used a wheelchair and he wanted to make sure she would be comfortable. The woman on the phone told him absolutely. Of course, they accommodated all guests. They looked forward to welcoming them. He hung up that phone feeling good, feeling like he had done everything right. They arrived at 7:30 on the evening of August 3rd, 2024. Eleanor wore a sapphire blue dress that she had bought specifically for that night. Daniel wore the same suit jacket he had worn to their wedding rehearsal dinner 34 years ago. It still fit, barely, and Eleanor had laughed when he put it on and called him her handsome old man. They walked through those doors together, Daniel pushing Eleanor's wheelchair, both of them smiling. For the first time in 3 years, Eleanor told me, she felt like herself again. Not a patient. Not a diagnosis, just a woman on her anniversary, going somewhere beautiful with the man she loved. The maitre d' looked at them. Then he looked at the wheelchair, and something shifted in his face, something subtle, something that Eleanor noticed immediately because disabled people always notice it, that flicker, that almost imperceptible recalibration. He smiled, checked the reservation, and led them through the restaurant. But he did not take them to the main dining room with the chandeliers and the candle-lit tables and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He walked them past all of it, down a narrow corridor, around a corner, and seated them at a table beside the entrance to the service kitchen, where waitstaff pushed through swinging doors every 40 seconds, where the noise of the kitchen spilled out every time those doors opened, where the smell of cleaning solution mixed with the food, where not a single other paying customer was seated, not one. Daniel asked to be moved. He was calm, he was respectful. He simply said they had requested accessible seating, and this did not feel like the dining experience they had reserved. The maitre d' disappeared, and then Dominic Hargrove appeared. 44 years old, general manager of Maison Laurent for 11 years. He walked toward their table with the smooth, practiced confidence of a man who had never once in his life been told no. He was polite the way a blade is polite, clean, precise, and designed to cut. He told Daniel that the table they had been given was the restaurant's designated accessible seating. He said the main dining room had very narrow spacing between tables and that moving a wheelchair through it would create a disruption for other guests. He used the word disruption about Eleanor, about a woman sitting quietly in a blue dress on her anniversary. Daniel told him that was unacceptable. Hargrove's expression did not change. He leaned down slightly toward Eleanor, and this is the moment that was caught on camera by a woman 2 tables away who had been watching the entire exchange with growing disbelief. And he said in a voice that carried across the surrounding area, "This is a fine dining establishment, not a medical facility. If your condition makes it difficult to dine in a standard environment, perhaps a more suitable venue would better serve your needs. A fine dining establishment, not a medical facility," said to a woman in a blue dress on her anniversary, in front of her husband, in front of strangers, said as though Eleanor Vasquez was an inconvenience to be redirected rather than a human being to be welcomed. The woman who filmed it posted it that night. By morning, it had 2 million views. By the end of the following day, 14 million. The internet was on fire. And 3 weeks later, Dominic Hargrove walked into my courtroom. If you are watching this right now and your blood is boiling, good. It should be. Hit that like button right now, because what happened inside that courtroom is something the internet never fully got to see. The cameras were outside, I was inside, and I saw everything. Dominic Hargrove walked into my courtroom on the morning of September 9th, 2024, with 3 attorneys from one of the most expensive litigation firms in Los Angeles. 3. For a civil discrimination case. He wore a charcoal Brioni suit that I estimated at somewhere around $4,000. His shoes were Berluti. His watch was a Patek Philippe. I recognized it because a defendant once tried to bribe me with one, but that is a story for another day. He walked in like a man who had already won, like this was a minor inconvenience scheduled between breakfast and a golf game. He did not look at Eleanor when he entered, not once. She was sitting in her wheelchair at the plaintiff's table in her Sunday best, hands folded, spine straight, eyes forward. He walked right past her like she was furniture. I have seen arrogance in this courtroom before. I have seen wealthy men treat my courtroom like a formality. But something about the way Dominic Hargrove carried himself that morning told me exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. He was not nervous. He was not remorseful. He was annoyed, genuinely, visibly annoyed that he had to be there at all. And that annoyance, that breathtaking sense of entitlement, is what ultimately destroyed him. Because arrogant men make mistakes. They always do. They cannot help themselves. I called the case. Eleanor testified first. She wheeled herself forward and she told her story the same way she had told it to me in pretrial. Clearly, precisely, without drama or exaggeration. She described the reservation, the phone call, the arrival, the maitre d's face, the table by the service kitchen, the smell, the noise, the swinging doors. When she got to Hargrove's words, "This is a fine dining establishment, not a medical facility," her voice did not break. She said it quietly, and she looked directly at him when she said it. Hargrove was looking at his phone. His own attorney had to tap his arm to make him put it down. Then I ordered the video played on the courtroom monitor, the full 47 seconds, no edits, no commentary, just what happened. And I watched every single person in that courtroom watch it. I watched the court reporter's jaw tighten. I watched one of Hargrove's own junior attorneys look down at the table. I watched Eleanor watch herself on that screen, a woman in a sapphire blue dress being told she did not belong. And I watched her lift her chin slightly when it was over, like she was refusing to be reduced by it even now, even here. That image, Eleanor Vasquez lifting her chin, is something I will carry with me until my last day on this bench. When the video ended, I looked at Hargrove. He shrugged. He actually shrugged. His lead attorney stood and delivered a polished, well-rehearsed argument. He said the seating was ADA compliant. He produced documents. He cited measurements. He used words like reasonable accommodation and operational logistics and guest experience preservation. It was a masterpiece of saying nothing with great confidence. Then Hargrove took the stand, and this is where everything unraveled, because I asked him one question, just one. I asked him whether, at any point during his interaction with Mr. and Mrs. Vasquez, he considered how his words might affect Eleanor as a human being rather than as a logistical obstacle. He looked at me like I had asked him something in a foreign language. Then he said, and I am quoting him exactly because I wrote it down the moment it came out of his mouth. He said, "Your Honor, my responsibility is to the overall dining experience of all our guests. One guest's personal situation cannot be permitted to compromise the experience of the other 200 people dining that evening." One guest's personal situation, that was Eleanor Vasquez to him. A personal situation, a variable, a disruption to be managed. The courtroom went absolutely silent. I let that silence sit for a long moment. Then I put down my pen. I looked at Hargrove's attorneys, all three of them, and I could see it on their faces. They knew. Their client had just handed me everything I needed. The ADA investigator's report entered the record next. The Department of Justice had conducted a full compliance inspection of Maison Laurent 14 days after the video went viral. Their findings were extensive and damning. The so-called accessible seating area failed ADA standards in 7 separate categories. More devastating, 3 former employees had submitted sworn affidavits confirming that the policy of seating wheelchair users in the service corridor area was not an accident, not an oversight, not a one-time failure of judgment. It was standard operating procedure, written nowhere, spoken everywhere, a quiet, deliberate, institutional decision to hide disabled guests where paying customers would not have to look at them. This was not one bad night. This was the policy. Hargrove knew, his management team knew, and they had been doing it for years. I ruled civil liability under the Americans with Disabilities Act sustained on all counts. Compensatory damages to Eleanor Vasquez, $185,000. I referred the case to the Department of Justice for federal investigation of all 12 properties operated by the same restaurant group. I ordered a mandatory ADA compliance audit across every location. I initiated a formal review of Hargrove's professional conduct with the California State Hospitality Licensing Board, and I stated clearly for the permanent record that what occurred at Maison Laurent on the evening of August 3rd, 2024 was not a misunderstanding, not a staffing error, and not an isolated incident. It was a pattern, it was a choice, and it would be treated accordingly. When I finished reading the ruling, I looked at Eleanor. She was crying silently. Not the way people cry when they are broken, but the way people cry when something that was taken from them has finally, after a very long time, been given back. After I read that ruling, I did something I rarely do in the middle of a court session. I stopped, I took off my glasses, I set them down on my bench, and I spoke, not as a judge delivering a legal decision, but as a human being who had spent 43 years watching what happens when people with power decide that certain people simply do not deserve to take up space in the world. I said for the record that Eleanor Vasquez had done nothing wrong, not one thing. She made a reservation. She confirmed it. She arrived on time. She dressed up. She smiled. She asked, politely, reasonably, as any paying customer has every right to do, to be seated where every other guest in that restaurant was seated. That is all she asked for. Not special treatment, not charity, not sympathy, equal treatment, the same table, the same view, the same experience that every other person who walked through those doors that evening received without question, without negotiation, and without being made to feel like a problem that needed to be solved. I said that Dominic Hargrove had made a choice that night. He chose to look at a woman in a wheelchair and see an inconvenience instead of a person. He chose to prioritize the comfort of guests who might be bothered by the sight of a wheelchair over the dignity of the human being sitting in it. He chose to use language, not a medical facility, personal situation, overall dining experience, that reduced Eleanor Vasquez from a wife, a mother, a teacher, a woman on her anniversary to a logistical variable. And I said that those choices had a name. They were called discrimination. And in my courtroom on this day, they had consequences. I looked at Hargrove one final time before I closed the session. He had the expression of a man who had just received a parking ticket, mildly irritated, already thinking about something else. And I thought to myself, that is the most dangerous kind of person. Not the ones who hate openly, but the ones who diminish quietly, the ones who never raise their voice, the ones who smile while they do it, the ones who go home that night and genuinely do not understand what they did wrong. Those are the people who do the most damage because they never stop. Now let me tell you what happened after that courtroom door closed. The Department of Justice investigation concluded 4 months later. The restaurant group that owned Maison Laurent, 12 locations across California and Nevada, was found to have systematic ADA violations across 9 of those 12 properties. The total federal settlement reached $2.3 million. Every location underwent mandatory renovation and full ADA compliance restructuring. Dominic Hargrove was removed from his position as general manager within 60 days of my ruling. His hospitality license was placed under a 2-year review. Maison Laurent itself was closed for renovation for 11 weeks. And when it reopened, when those doors opened again with wider corridors and properly accessible seating throughout the entire main dining room with the chandeliers and the candlelight and the windows overlooking the city, the first reservation on the books was for a Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Vasquez, best table in the house, window seat, full view of the city, complimentary. The restaurant's new management called my chambers personally to tell me. I told them that was the right thing to do. It was the least they could do. 3 weeks after that dinner, a photograph arrived in my chambers by mail. No letter, no explanation, just a photograph. Daniel in his suit jacket, the same one from 34 years ago, and Eleanor in her sapphire blue dress sitting at a table by the window, the city glittering behind them, both of them laughing at something just off camera. On the back of the photograph in Eleanor's handwriting were 5 words. She wrote, "We got our night, Judge." I framed it. It hangs on the wall of my chambers right now, between my law degree and a photograph of my father. It is the first thing I see every morning when I walk in and put on my robe. And on the mornings when this job feels heavy, when the cases are hard and the injustice feels endless, and I wonder whether any of it makes a difference, I look at that photograph, a woman in a blue dress, laughing, at the best table in the house, and I remember that it does. Here is what I need you to understand before you close this video. Eleanor Vasquez did not win because the system worked perfectly. She won because she refused to disappear. She won because a stranger in that restaurant held up her phone and said, "This is not right and people need to see it." She won because the law, imperfect and slow and frustrating as it is, still has teeth when someone is willing to use them. And she won because she walked into my courtroom and told her truth with her chin up and her hands steady and her dignity completely intact. And she made it impossible for justice to look away. You may never sit on a bench like mine. You may never hold a gavel or read a ruling or have the power to award damages and refer cases to the Department of Justice. But you have something just as powerful. You have your voice, you have your phone, you have the ability right now, today, in your own life, to be the stranger who holds up the camera, to be the person who says this is not right and refuses to walk past it. Every single act of witness matters. Every single moment of refusing to look away matters. Do not underestimate what you carry. If this story moved you, If Eleanor's dignity moved you, if Daniel's love moved you, if the simple radical idea that every human being deserves to sit at the same table moved you, then I am asking you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that subscribe button because I have 43 years worth of stories from this bench, and some of them will shake you to your core, and some of them will restore every piece of faith in humanity you have ever lost. Second, share this video, not just to share it, but because somewhere in your life there is a person who needs to hear Eleanor's story today, someone who is tired, someone who has been made to feel invisible. Send it to them. Let them know they are not alone. And third, leave me a comment right now and tell me this. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated as less than in public? What did you do? What do you wish you had done? I read every single comment, everyone. The next video on your screen is about a homeless veteran who stood in my courtroom with nothing, no lawyer, no money, no advocate, and what happened when a prosecutor tried to take advantage of that. I promise you, you are not ready for what I did. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for caring about Eleanor Vasquez. And remember, dignity is not a privilege. It is not something you earn by being able-bodied or wealthy or easy to look at. It is a birthright. Every single one of us carries it, and every single one of us deserves to have it honored. God bless you. Take care of each other.